High Admiral stood in his command center, watching another red dot disappear from the star map. That was the 7th Fleet lost this month. The Hive Collective was winning, and there was nothing he could do about it. The war had been going on for 3 years now. 3 years of watching his people die while following the same old tactics that had worked for 1,000 years. But the Hive was different. They fought like machines because they were machines. Every move was calculated. Every response was perfect. They never made mistakes and they never got tired. "Sir, we just lost contact with Battle Group 7, reported his aide, a young officer named Han. His voice shook as he spoke. Everyone was scared now. Closed his eyes for a moment. Battle Group 7 had been his best units. 40 ships and 12,000 soldiers, all gone. The Hive had cut through them like they were made of paper. "How?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Same as always, sir. They predicted our attack patterns perfectly. Our ships moved exactly where the Hive expected them to go. The enemy was waiting for us." This was the problem. The Empire had been the strongest power in the galaxy for centuries. Their military traditions went back thousands of years. Every battle formation was tested and proven. Every strategy was written in books that generals studied for decades. But tradition was killing them now. The Hive Collective fought differently. They analyzed everything. They could predict exactly what forces would do because forces always did the same things. Honor demanded certain responses. Tradition required specific formations. The enemy knew this and used it against them. Walked to the big window that looked out at space. He could see his remaining fleet in the distance. Beautiful ships built for honorable combat. Ships that were losing every battle. "Sir," Han said quietly, "the War Council is asking for your report." The War Council, a group of old generals who still believed that honor and tradition would win the day. They would want him to request more ships and try the same failed tactics again. They would talk about the glorious past and refuse to change anything. "Tell them I'll report in 1 hour," said. "I need to think." He had been thinking for weeks now. The Empire needed something new, something the Hive couldn't predict, but where could they find generals who thought differently? The answer had come from an unexpected source. 3 months ago, his scouts had discovered a new world on the edge of known space, a planet called Earth. The reports about this world were strange and disturbing. Earth was what the science teams called a death world. Everything on the planet tried to kill everything else. The weather could freeze or cook a person in hours. The animals were all predators. Even the plants were dangerous. It should have been impossible for intelligent life to develop there. But somehow, humans had not just survived but thrived. They had built cities and nations while fighting constant wars with each other and with their own planet. The scouts reported that humans had been in almost continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. What caught attention was how they fought. Human military tactics made no sense to observers. They seemed to break every rule of proper warfare. They used tricks and lies. They attacked when they should defend and ran away when they should attack. They turned their own weaknesses into strengths and found ways to make their enemy's strengths work against them. The scouts' reports described human generals who seemed more like than military leaders. They made decisions that should have been disasters but somehow worked. They won battles they should have lost and survived situations that should have killed them. Han called. "Yes, sir." "Get me the files on Earth again, the ones about their military leaders." Han brought him the data pad, read through the reports once more. Stories of human commanders who had won impossible victories. Leaders who had saved their nations by doing things no reasonable general would ever consider. There was one story about a human named Napoleon who had conquered most of his continent by moving his armies faster than anyone thought possible. Another about a general named who had defeated enemies by attacking in the worst weather conditions when everyone expected him to wait. A woman called who had inspired her people to victory, even though she was just a farm girl with no training. These humans fought like they were insane, but they won. The more thought about it, the more sense it made. The Hive could predict tactics because tactics were logical and traditional, but how could anyone predict insanity? He made his decision. Han, I want you to prepare a message for Earth. Tell them we want to hire some of their military officers. The young aide looked confused. Sir, we're going to ask aliens to lead our forces. Not lead, corrected. Advise, I want to see if their unusual methods might help us. The War Council won't approve this, sir. Smiled for the first time in weeks. The War Council isn't winning this war, Han. Maybe it's time to try something they would never approve of. He walked back to the star map and looked at all the red zones where Hive forces controlled space that used to belong to the Empire. Traditional tactics had lost all of this territory. Honor and dignity had failed to protect his people. Maybe it was time to try madness instead. The message was sent that day. Within a week, Earth had responded. They would send 12 of their military officers to help fight the Hive. The humans asked for very little payment. They just wanted to study Hive technology and learn about space warfare. Approved the deal immediately, before the War Council could stop him. By the time the old generals found out what he had done, the human transport ship was already on its way. He spent the next month reading everything he could find about human military history. The more he learned, the more worried he became. These weren't the disciplined, professional officers he had expected. These were people who had been shaped by a world that tried to kill them every day. But they were also people who never gave up and never accepted defeat. As he waited for the humans to arrive, wondered if he had just made the decision of his career or the biggest mistake in galactic history. Either way, the war was about to change in ways no one could predict. The Empire had asked for generals. What they were getting might be something much more dangerous. The transport ship arrived 3 weeks later than scheduled. When asked the human pilot why they were late, the answer made him question his decision immediately. "Oh, we stopped to help some traders who were being attacked by pirates," the pilot said with a shrug. Seemed like the right thing to do. "You stopped to fight pirates in a transport ship?" Han asked in disbelief. "Yeah, well, Sarah had some ideas about using the cargo containers as weapons. Worked pretty well actually. The pirates weren't expecting a freight ship to start shooting shipping containers at them." And his staff exchanged worried looks. These humans had turned a peaceful transport mission into a combat operation just because they felt like it. The human pilot, who introduced himself as captain, seemed to think this was completely normal. "Don't worry, we didn't damage your ship much. Managed to fix most of the things Sarah blew up." "Sarah blew things up on the ship?" asked. "Oh, not important things," said with a wave of his hand. "Just some walls and a few decks, nothing that mattered." Was beginning to think he had made a terrible mistake. The 12 human officers who walked off the transport ship looked nothing like what he had expected. Generals were always perfectly groomed, wearing spotless uniforms covered in medals and decorations. They moved with dignity and spoke with careful respect for rank and tradition. The humans looked like they had been in a war for years. The first one off the ship was a woman who introduced herself as Colonel Sarah Martinez. She was shorter than most but had muscles that showed even through her uniform. Her hair was pulled back roughly, and she had scars on her face and hands. When she shook his hand, her grip was strong enough to hurt. "Nice ship," she said, looking around the landing bay. "But your security is terrible. I counted 17 ways to sabotage this place just walking from the transport to here." "You were looking for ways to sabotage our base?" Han asked nervously. Martinez looked at him like he was stupid. "Of course. That's what you do when you enter a new area. Look for weak points. Your enemy will do the same thing, so you better find them first." The second human was a small Asian woman who moved very quietly. She introduced herself as commander, but she was already distracted by something else. She was looking at the walls and ceiling with great interest. "These power conduits are completely exposed," she said to no one in particular. "And your computer systems are just sitting there with no protection at all. This whole station could be taken over in about 20 minutes if someone knew what they were doing." "Are you threatening us?" asked General, the officer assigned to work with the humans. "Looks surprised." "No, I'm helping you. I'm pointing out problems so you can fix them. Although if you want, I could show you how easy it would be to hack your systems. Might be educational." The third human was a tall black man who carried himself with quiet confidence. Captain had the strangest job title any of them had ever heard: Strategic Infrastructure Analyst. When they asked what that meant, his answer was disturbing. "I figure out how to break things in ways that make other things break too," he explained. "Like, if you damage the right support beam, you can bring down a whole building. Or if you cut the right communication line, an entire army stops working together." "You study how to destroy our own facilities?" asked. "Well, yes, but also how to protect them. You have to understand how something can be broken before you can make sure it won't be broken. Your enemies will try to find these weak points, so you need to find them first." The other 9 humans were just as unusual. There was Lieutenant Colonel Amy, who specialized in psychological warfare operations. When they asked her to explain, she said her job was to make enemy soldiers too scared or confused to fight properly. Major Robert was an adaptive logistics specialist, which apparently meant he could make weapons and supplies out of anything he could find. He spent his first hour on the station asking where he could get duct tape, wire, and something that explodes but not too much. Captain was a communications disruption expert, who could not only jam enemy signals, but also make them think they were receiving real orders when they were actually getting fake ones. The list went on. Each human had a specialty that sounded more like organized vandalism than military science. What worried most was how they acted. Officers followed strict rules about rank and respect. They never questioned orders from superiors. They treated military traditions with reverence. The humans argued with everyone, including each other. "Sarah, your idea about using the cargo containers as weapons was stupid and dangerous," said during their first briefing. "It worked, didn't it?" Martinez shot back. "And it was your modifications to the launch system that made it possible." "That doesn't make it less stupid. We could have killed ourselves." "But we didn't, and we saved those traitors." "Pure luck." "No such thing as luck, only preparation meeting opportunity." Join the argument. "Actually, both of you are wrong. The real problem was that we didn't plan it properly. If we had taken time to analyze the pirate ship design, we could have disabled them without fighting at all." "Where's the fun in that?" Martinez asked. Watched this exchange with growing horror. These people treated military operations like a game. They showed no respect for authority and seemed to think every order was just a suggestion. When General tried to brief them on proper military procedures, the humans' reactions were even more disturbing. "You announce your attacks ahead of time?" Martinez asked with genuine confusion. "It is a matter of honor," explained. "We challenge our enemies to face us in fair combat." "But that means they know you're coming," pointed out. "Of course, this allows both sides to prepare for battle properly." "And you consider it wrong to attack enemies when they're retreating?" asked. "A retreating enemy has already admitted defeat. To continue attacking would be dishonorable." The humans looked at each other in amazement. "No wonder you're losing this war," Martinez said bluntly. The room fell silent. No one had ever spoken to a general that way. His face turned dark blue with anger. "You dare insult our traditions." "I'm not insulting anything," Martinez replied. "I'm just pointing out that your traditions are getting your people killed. You're fighting an enemy that doesn't care about honor or fairness. They're trying to win, and you're trying to look good while losing. Our way of warfare has brought victory for 1,000 years. Your way of warfare worked against enemies who followed the same rules, said calmly. The Hive doesn't follow your rules. They're using your honor against you. Added, from what I've read, the Hive predicts your moves because your moves never change. You do the same things every time because tradition says you should. That makes you easy to beat. Realized that the humans were right, but he also realized something else. These weren't the professional military advisors he had requested. These were something much more dangerous. These were people who looked at every rule and asked why it existed. They questioned everything and respected nothing except what worked. He had asked for generals who could think outside traditional tactics. What he had gotten were people who thought outside all traditions. As he watched the 12 humans continue to argue and analyze everything in his command center, wondered if he had just saved his empire or doomed it to chaos. Either way, the war was about to become very different. The first joint operation was supposed to be simple. General had planned it carefully, following standard procedures that had worked for centuries. They would send a small force to the mining planet VII, observe Hive defenses from a safe distance, gather intelligence, and return with information for a future attack. This is a reconnaissance mission only, explained to the assembled officers. We will not engage the enemy unless absolutely necessary. Our job is to watch and learn. The humans sat in the back of the briefing room, listening quietly. This made nervous. They had been asking strange questions all week, and their silence now felt dangerous. The plan is straightforward, continued. We approach the planet in standard formation. 3 ships will maintain position at the outer sensor range while 1 ship moves closer to scan Hive installations. If detected, we withdraw immediately. Martinez raised her hand. What kind of defenses are we expecting? Standard Hive patrol patterns. Approximately 12 ships in orbit, with ground installations on the main mining site. What about their detection range? Our intelligence suggests they can detect approaching ships at about 50,000 kilometers. Made a note on his data pad. What's the composition of the mining operation? How many facilities? 7 primary extraction sites, connected by transport tubes. Why does this matter for a reconnaissance mission? Just curious about the infrastructure, replied with an innocent smile. Didn't like that smile. He had learned to be worried when humans looked innocent. The mission launched the next day. 4 ships, each carrying a mix of crew and human advisors, commanded from the lead ship with Martinez assigned as his advisor, went with the scanning ship while split her time between the other 2 vessels. Everything went according to plan for exactly 3 hours. Then disappeared. Where is Captain? Demanded. He said he needed to check something in the cargo bay, reported commander from the scanning ship. Find him immediately. But was gone. So was one of the maintenance shuttles and half of the electronic equipment from the ship's repair shop. He stole a shuttle, asked in disbelief. It appears so, sir, replied. He also took some kind of transmitter array and what looks like reprogramming equipment. Martinez shrugged when they asked her about it. Probably had an idea. He gets those sometimes. An idea? He just deserted his post. No, he'll be back. He always comes back, usually with something useful. 6 hours later, returned with the shuttle. He was grinning and carrying a large metal box that definitely hadn't belonged to them before. Where have you been? Shouted. Getting us some real intelligence, replied cheerfully. Turns out the Hive uses automated maintenance drones to service their orbital platforms. I caught one and sent it back with some extra sensors. We now have complete blueprints of their defensive network. He connected his box to the ship's computers and detailed schematics appeared on every screen. The officers stared in amazement. The intelligence was perfect, every weapon position, every patrol route, every weak point in the hive defenses. "How did you do this?" asked. "Simple social engineering. The hive drones are programmed to trust other hive equipment. I just convinced one that my equipment was part of their network. They never suspected anything because they never thought anyone would be crazy enough to try it. You could have been killed." "But I wasn't, and now we know exactly how their defenses work." Was torn between admiration and horror. The intelligence was incredibly valuable, but had completely ignored orders and put himself in terrible danger. Then things got worse. While had been gone, had been busy on the other ships. She had somehow modified their sensor arrays to do something she called aggressive electronic reconnaissance. "What does that mean?" asked nervously. "I'm not just scanning their systems," explained. "I'm testing them, sending little probes into their networks to see how they respond, learning their security protocols." "You're attacking them." "Just poking them a little, nothing harmful, although I did find some interesting vulnerabilities in their communication systems." Before could stop her, was already implementing what she called passive network infiltration. She was stealing data directly from hive computers while they watched. "This is not reconnaissance," protested. "This is an attack." "No, this is preparation," Martinez corrected. "We're just getting ready in case something happens." Something did happen. The hive detected their activities and responded exactly as their programming dictated. 12 enemy ships moved to intercept the reconnaissance force. "Withdraw immediately," ordered. "All ships return to base at maximum speed." "Wait," Martinez said. "This is perfect." "Perfect? We're about to be destroyed." "No, we're about to test their response patterns under real conditions. Are your new sensors working?" "Perfectly. I'm getting detailed scans of every enemy ship." "Can you disrupt their formation communications?" "Already doing it. They're starting to have trouble coordinating." Watched in horror as the humans turned his carefully planned withdrawal into an impromptu combat operation. But what happened next all logic. Instead of pursuing the retreating ships in an organized manner, the hive fleet began to spread out randomly. Their perfect coordination was breaking down as selectronic interference confused their communications. "Now," Martinez said calmly, "the humans implemented what they later called strategic chaos. Instead of running away as ordered, they split their 4 ships into 12 different groups using every shuttle and maintenance pod available. Each group went in a different direction, creating multiple targets moving in unpredictable patterns. The hive ships, programmed to respond to specific threats, couldn't decide which targets to prioritize. Their algorithms had never encountered anything like this before. Used his stolen intelligence to guide 3 shuttles directly into blind spots in the hive sensor network. Overloaded their tracking systems with false signals. Martinez convinced 2 maintenance pods to ram hive ships at exactly the right angle to disable their weapons without destroying them. When the chaos ended 6 hours later, the results were impossible to believe. The force had not only escaped without losses, they had actually captured 3 hive processing stations and disabled 5 enemy ships. "How did this happen?" asked when the ships returned to base. "Simple," Martinez explained. "We gave them too many problems to solve at once. The hive is designed to handle threats efficiently, but efficiency requires predictable situations. We made the situation unpredictable." Added, their decision-making algorithms couldn't handle multiple simultaneous events that didn't fit their programming. So they essentially froze up while we took advantage of the confusion. "And the captured stations?" "Those were just targets of opportunity," said. "Once their defensive systems were confused, it was easy to take control of isolated facilities." Sat down heavily in his chair. His simple reconnaissance mission had turned into the most successful operation the Empire had conducted in months. but it had also violated every principle of proper military conduct. "We were supposed to observe, not attack," he said weakly. "We did observe," pointed out. "We observed that their defenses don't work when faced with coordinated chaos. You destroyed any possibility of future surprise attacks on that system." "No," Martinez corrected. "We destroyed their confidence in their defensive algorithms. Now they'll spend months trying to figure out what we did and how to prevent it. While they're doing that, they won't be attacking us." Realized that the humans had accomplished something remarkable. They had turned a defeat into a victory, gathered perfect intelligence, and captured valuable resources. But they had also completely ignored orders and put everyone at terrible risk. "The War Council will want a full report," he said. "Tell them we're just getting started," Martinez replied with a grin. Over the next few days, as tried to write a report that would explain what had happened, he began to understand something important. The humans didn't break rules just to be difficult. They broke rules because rules were weaknesses that enemies could exploit. Every tradition, every standard procedure, every predictable response was information that the Hive could use against them. The humans had won by being unpredictable. But unpredictability was dangerous in more ways than one. If the humans could confuse the enemy, they could probably confuse their own allies just as easily. As he finished his report, wondered if he had found the key to victory or unleashed something that would destroy them all. The war was certainly going to be different now. Word of the VII operation spread through the Empire faster than official reports could be written. 3 captured Hive installations, and 0 casualties was unheard of. High Command demanded to know how this had been accomplished. When the War Council read's report, their first reaction was to court-martial everyone involved. Their second reaction, after reviewing the intelligence data the humans had gathered, was to give them whatever they wanted. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need," declared Supreme General during an emergency session. "We should expand the Human Advisory Program immediately." Admiral felt a chill of worry. "Sir, I should point out that the humans completely ignored their orders during that mission." "But they succeeded. Results are what matter now." Within a week, the humans were given unprecedented authority to advise on military operations throughout the sector. What followed was a series of battles that made traditional warfare look like a children's game. The first major operation was the liberation of Station, a critical supply depot that had been under Hive control for 8 months. The station was heavily defended, and previous attempts to retake it had failed with massive casualties. Martinez proposed what she called infrastructural Aikido. "Instead of attacking the station directly, we use their own systems against them," she explained to the assembled officers. "Every defensive system can be turned into a weapon if you understand how it works." "How do you propose to do this?" asked General, the operation commander. "Simple, we make them think they're under attack from somewhere else, so they shoot each other." The plan sounded insane, but had studied the station's blueprints and found something interesting. The Hive had installed their defensive weapons in a pattern that created overlapping fields of fire. This was supposed to make the station impossible to attack. "But if you can convince the weapons that enemy ships are in specific positions," explained, "they'll fire at those positions even if the only things there are other defensive weapons." Had figured out how to hack the station's targeting systems. "Their security is actually pretty good," she admitted, "but they never expected anyone to attack them through their own maintenance network." The operation began with psychological warfare unit broadcasting fake distress signals from multiple directions around the station. This made it look like a large fleet was approaching from several angles at once. Then activated her virus program, which convinced the station's computers that enemy ships were hiding among their own defensive platforms. The automated weapon systems began firing at each other. While the station was destroying its own defenses, led a small team in captured Hive maintenance shuttles. They approached the station during the confusion and began repairing critical systems by installing explosives that were disguised as replacement parts. The entire operation took 4 hours. The Hive garrison surrendered when they realized their station was being systematically dismantled by their own equipment. "How many casualties?" asked in amazement. "None," Martinez reported, "unless you count the Hive drones that got confused and shut themselves down." The success led to even more ambitious operations. The humans began teaching their techniques to officers who were willing to learn. This created a new problem. The Empire itself was beginning to change. Young officers started questioning orders that didn't make sense. They began thinking about problems instead of just following procedures. They stopped announcing their attacks and started using deception and misdirection. Captain, who had worked with during the mission, successfully captured a Hive communications relay by convincing it that he was a maintenance technician. Commander used psychological tactics to make an entire Hive patrol fleet surrender without firing a shot. But the most dramatic change came from major adaptive logistics training. Engineers learned to turn shipping containers into missiles, communication arrays into jamming devices, and mining equipment into improvised weapons. "This is not how civilized beings conduct warfare," complained General, one of the old-school commanders. "We are abandoning everything that makes us different from barbarians." Understood his concern. The Empire had always prided itself on honor and discipline, but honor and discipline were losing the war. The humans didn't just change tactics, they changed the entire nature of conflict, taught communication specialists how to send false orders to enemy fleets, showed supply officers how to contaminate Hive fuel with substances that made their engines malfunction, trained engineers to build weapons that looked like innocent equipment. "We're not just fighting the Hive anymore," observed during a strategy meeting. "We're fighting the way we've always thought about fighting." The results were undeniable. In 3 months, the Empire recovered more territory than they had in the previous 2 years. Hive forces found themselves unable to predict movements or counter their tactics. But the Hive was learning too. Reports began coming in of unusual Hive behavior. Instead of their normal coordinated attacks, some Hive units were acting independently. They were trying new tactics and abandoning failed strategies. Some were even retreating when logic said they should continue fighting. "The Hive is adapting," reported after analyzing captured enemy communications. "Their collective intelligence is learning from our methods." "Learning what?" Martinez asked. "Learning to be unpredictable." This was exactly what the humans had been afraid of. Their greatest advantage was that they could think in ways the Hive couldn't understand. If the Hive learned to think like humans, that advantage would disappear. Studied the problem for weeks before proposing a solution that terrified everyone who heard it. "We have to teach the Hive to think like individuals," he said during a top-secret briefing. "If we can break their collective consciousness, they won't be able to coordinate their forces effectively." "You want to destroy their ability to work together?" asked. "Not destroy, transform. Right now, the Hive thinks as one mind controlling millions of bodies. But what if those bodies started thinking for themselves?" "That's impossible. The Hive collective is their greatest strength." "It's also their greatest weakness," pointed out. "A collective consciousness has no defense against individual thought. They can't comprehend concepts like personal doubt, creative thinking, or independent decision-making." Martinez grinned. "So we infect them with humanity." The plan was more complex than anything they had attempted before. It required penetrating the Hive's main data networks and introducing what called cognitive viruses, programs designed not to damage their systems, but to change how they thought. Instead of giving them new information, explained, we give them new ways of processing information. We teach their minds to question orders, consider alternatives, and make independent choices. The operation would require infiltrating the hive itself. It would be the most dangerous mission any of them had ever attempted. But if it worked, it would end the war in a way no one had ever imagined. "When do we start?" asked. "Tomorrow," Martinez replied. "The longer we wait, the more time they have to adapt to our methods." As the meeting ended, realized that the humans had already changed his empire beyond recognition. Officers were thinking like guerrilla fighters. Traditional military academies were teaching courses on psychological warfare and sabotage. The rigid hierarchy that had maintained order for thousands of years was being replaced by flexible command structures that could adapt to any situation. The humans had promised to help them win the war, but they had also fundamentally altered what it meant to be. Looking at his transformed officers, wondered if victory would be worth the price. His empire was becoming something new, something that combined honor with human creativity. He just hoped it would still be recognizable when the war was over. The final battle would determine not just who won the war, but what kind of civilization would emerge from it. The hive was not a planet in any traditional sense. It was a massive artificial construct the size of a small moon, covered entirely in processing centers and data networks. Every surface buzzed with activity as billions of drones carried out the collective will of the hive mind. "It's beautiful in a terrifying way," observed as their disguised ship approached like looking at a single organism that happens to be the size of a world. The plan was ambitious even by human standards. They would infiltrate the central processing core and introduce cognitive viruses into the main data stream. If successful, the viruses would spread throughout the entire hive network, teaching individual nodes to think independently. "Remember," Martinez said as they reviewed the mission one final time, "we're not trying to destroy them, we're trying to liberate them." Their ship was actually a captured hive transport that had modified extensively. To any external observer, it appeared to be delivering routine supplies to the hive's own security systems would guide them directly to their target. "Approach vector confirmed," reported the ship's pilot, an officer who had learned human-style improvisation remarkably well. "We're being directed to docking bay 77 Alpha." "Perfect," said. "That puts us exactly where we need to be." The docking bay was located near the central core, where the hive's primary consciousness resided. Viruses needed to be introduced as close to the source as possible to ensure maximum spread. As they docked, felt a mixture of pride and terror. The Empire's most elite units had been unable to get within 1,000 kilometers of this place. Now 12 humans and a handful of volunteers were walking into the heart of enemy territory disguised as maintenance workers. "Phase 1 complete," announced as they left the ship. "We're inside." The interior of the hive was unlike anything they had ever seen. Corridors stretched in impossible directions, filled with the constant movement of drones carrying out tasks that seemed to have no beginning or end. The air hummed with electronic communication as millions of minds shared information at the speed of light. "It's like being inside a giant brain," whispered. "That's exactly what it is," replied, "and we're about to give it some new ideas." They moved through the corridors following a carefully planned route. His analysis of the hive structure had identified the optimal access points for introducing the cognitive viruses. They needed to reach 3 separate locations to ensure the viruses could spread throughout the entire network. The first target was a data relay station that handled communication between different sectors of connected her equipment to the main console while uploaded his first virus. "This one is designed to introduce the concept of curiosity," he explained as the upload completed. "Instead of just processing orders, some hive nodes will start asking why those orders exist. The effect was almost immediate. Several nearby drones stopped their work and began examining their tools with what could only be described as interest. One drone picked up a component and turned it over in its manipulator arms, studying it from different angles. "They're already changing," observed. "Look at their movement patterns." The drones were no longer moving in perfect synchronization. Some were walking faster, others slower. A few had stopped entirely to investigate things that had caught their attention. "Phase 2, Martinez announced. The second target was deeper in the complex, in a section that processed tactical data for military operations. This was more heavily defended, but had anticipated this. "We use the confusion we just created," he said as they approached a security checkpoint. "The guards won't know how to respond to behavior they've never seen before." He was right. The security drones were struggling to understand why some maintenance workers were moving differently than expected. Their programming had no procedures for handling curiosity or independent thought. Bypass the security systems, while the guards were distracted by a group of newly curious drones who had started taking apart a wall panel to see how it worked. "Second virus uploading," announced. "This one introduces the concept of individual preference. Some nodes will start making choices based on what they personally find interesting rather than what the collective commands." The effect was even more dramatic than the first virus. Drones throughout the facility began abandoning their assigned tasks to pursue activities they found more appealing. Some started building things. Others began organizing objects in patterns that had no practical purpose but seemed aesthetically pleasing to them. "The collective is trying to reassert control," reported as she monitored the network traffic. "But the affected nodes are resisting. They want to keep doing what they're doing." "That's the point," said with satisfaction. "Individual will is contagious." The third target was the most dangerous, the central processing core itself. This was where the primary hive consciousness resided, and it would be heavily defended by systems specifically designed to protect against intrusion. But by the time they reached the core, chaos was spreading throughout the drones were forming spontaneous groups to work on projects that the collective hadn't authorized. Some were creating art. Others were trying to communicate with each other in ways that weren't part of their programming. "The guards don't know what to do," Martinez observed as they approached the core. "They're programmed to stop intruders, but they can't tell who's an intruder anymore." The security drones were paralyzed by indecision. Some of the maintenance drones they were supposed to be protecting were behaving like intruders, but they were also clearly hive units. The conflict between protecting the collective and stopping unauthorized behavior created logical loops that crashed their decision-making systems. Access the central core directly, uploading his most sophisticated virus into the heart of the hive consciousness. "This one is the most important," he explained as the upload completed. "It introduces the concept of individual identity. Each node will start thinking of itself as a separate being with its own thoughts and feelings." The effect was catastrophic for the hive collective. The single consciousness that had controlled billions of units for centuries suddenly found itself trying to be billions of different people at the same time. "It's working," said in amazement as she watched the data streams. "The collective is fragmenting. Individual nodes are declaring independence from the main consciousness." But the transformation was more profound than anyone had expected. As the hive nodes became individuals, they didn't just stop following orders, they started developing personalities. Some became artists, using their tools to create sculptures and paintings. Others became explorers, leaving their posts to investigate parts of the they had never seen before. Many became social, gathering in groups to share their new thoughts and feelings. "They're becoming people," said in wonder. The mission team watched in fascination as the transformed around them. What had been a perfectly coordinated machine became a chaotic but vibrant community of newly conscious beings. "We should go," Martinez said eventually. "This place is going to be very confused for a while." They returned to their ship and departed without interference. The Hive defense systems were too busy trying to understand what was happening to their own forces to worry about a single transport ship. The journey back to Empire space took 2 weeks. During that time, reports began arriving of Hive forces throughout the galaxy simply stopping their military operations. Some were sending surrender requests, others were asking for asylum. Many were just sitting still, apparently contemplating their newfound existence. "What happens now?" asked as they reviewed the reports. "Now we help them figure out how to be individuals," replied. "It's going to take time. They've never had to make personal decisions before." "Some of them are asking to join the Empire," reported. "They want to learn about concepts like friendship and art and music." "And others are forming their own small communities," added. "They're trying to create new ways of living that combine their collective knowledge with individual creativity." The war was over, but not in the way anyone had imagined. There had been no final battle, no surrender ceremony, no conquered territories. Instead, the enemy had simply stopped being an enemy. "The galaxy is going to be very different now," observed. "Different how?" Martinez asked. "Well, we now have millions of former Hive drones who are learning to be people. They have incredible technical knowledge but no experience with individual life. Some want to join existing civilizations, others want to create new ones. Everyone is going to have to learn how to live with neighbors who think completely differently than they do." "Sounds like fun," Martinez said with a grin. In the months that followed, the transformation continued. The Empire found itself hosting thousands of former Hive units who wanted to learn about concepts like democracy, art, and personal relationships. Many proved to be incredibly capable once they learned to think for themselves. The Empire itself was forever changed by the experience. The rigid military hierarchy had been replaced by flexible command structures. Officers were encouraged to think creatively and question orders that didn't make sense. The ancient traditions remained, but they were now balanced by human-inspired adaptability. "We asked for generals," said during a ceremony honoring the human advisors. "But what we got was something much more valuable. We got teachers who showed us how to think differently." "Don't give us too much credit," Martinez replied. "You did all the hard work. We just pointed out that your rules were getting in your way." "What will you do now?" asked. "The war is over." Smiled. "Oh, I'm sure we'll find something interesting to do. The galaxy just got a lot more complicated, and complicated problems are our specialty." As the ceremony ended, looked out at his transformed empire. Young officers were working alongside former Hive drones to develop new technologies. Artists were collaborating with beings who had never understood beauty until a few months ago. Scientists were exploring questions that no one had thought to ask before. The humans had promised to help win the war. Instead, they had fundamentally changed the nature of civilization itself. They had shown that the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from helping them become friends. The Empire had expected generals who could think outside traditional tactics. What they had gotten were people who could think outside all traditions, and who had taught an entire galaxy to do the same. As Martinez had said during that first chaotic mission, "You wanted generals, but generals fight the last war. We fight the war nobody's thought of yet." Now, thanks to 12 humans trained on Earth, the galaxy was ready for whatever unimaginable challenges lay ahead. 3 weeks later, space itself seemed to tear apart at the edge of the Sol system. Bright flashes of light announced the arrival of Battle Fleet Omega-7. One by one, massive ships dropped out of hyperspace. Each vessel was a monument to hegemony, power, and engineering. Fleet Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the absolute victory. The ship was 60 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Through the main, he watched his fleet take formation. It was beautiful in its own terrifying way. "Status report," commanded. His 6 arms moved across multiple control panels at once. "All ships have arrived safely, Commander," reported his tactical officer, a thin gray alien with large black eyes. "No damage from the hyperspace jump. All weapons and shields are operational." "Excellent. Begin long-range scans of the system. I want to know everything about human defenses." The bridge crew worked quickly. Sensors reached across millions of kilometers, mapping every object in the Sol system. The results appeared on the main screen. "Sir," called the sensor operator, "we are detecting the human fleet. They are clustered around the third planet Earth." "Study the readouts. How many ships?" "Approximately 200 vessels, sir. Various sizes. The largest appears to be about 4 kilometers long." Almost laughed. His smallest escort ships were 6 kilometers long. "What about their weapons?" "Basic energy cannons, sir. Some missile systems. Primitive kinetic weapons. Nothing that should threaten our shields." "Any planetary defenses?" The sensor operator checked his readings twice. "Negative, sir. No orbital defense platforms. No planetary shield generators. No weapon satellites." Shook his head in disbelief. He had conquered primitive worlds before, but this was ridiculous. The humans had made no effort to defend there. It was almost insulting. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Standard intimidation formation. Put the dreadnoughts in front. I want the humans to see exactly what they are facing." The massive fleet began to move. At the front, 12 planet-killer dreadnoughts led the way. Each one was a floating city of destruction. Behind them came 600 heavy cruisers, their hulls bristling with weapons. 1,000 destroyers formed the main body of the fleet, while smaller ships protected the flanks. As they traveled toward Earth, reviewed the intelligence files on humans. They were a young species, barely 300,000 years old. They had only achieved space flight recently. Their technology was crude but functional. They were known for being stubborn and aggressive, but every species thought they were tough until they faced the hegemony. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we are now close enough to send surrender demands." "Do it. Use all standard languages. Give them the usual terms: immediate surrender, acceptance of hegemony rule, and tribute payments. Make it clear that resistance is futile." The message went out in 847 different galactic languages. It was the same demand the hegemony had used for 3,000 years. Most species surrendered immediately when they realized what they faced. The response came back in crude human English. The voice was female, calm and professional. "This is Admiral of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human space without permission. You have 10 minutes to leave our system or we will consider you hostile. This is your only warning." The bridge fell silent. Then someone laughed. Soon, half the crew was making the equivalent of laughter in their various species. The idea that humans were giving them an ultimatum was absurd. Smiled coldly. "They demand that we leave. 2,000 ships and they want us to retreat." "Sir," the tactical officer said, still chuckling, "their entire fleet could fit inside our smallest dreadnought's hangar bay." "Humans are known for their pride," mused. "Very well, we will give them a demonstration of reality. Continue our advance. Charge all weapons. Once we pass Mars' orbit, we will show them the futility of resistance." The fleet moved deeper into the Sol system. They passed the outer planets without incident. Jupiter was massive and impressive, but it was just a ball of gas. Saturn's rings were beautiful, but they held no threat. As they approached the asteroid belt, sensors began picking up more detailed readings from the human fleet. The enemy ships were spread in a loose sphere around Earth. They were not advancing to meet the hegemony fleet, which was unusual. Most species either surrendered immediately or charged forward in a futile attack. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "I am detecting unusual energy readings from the human vessels." Looked at the displays. "What kind of energy?" "Unknown, sir. It does not match any weapon systems in our database, but the power levels are significant." "How significant?" The operator checked his readings again. "Each human ship is generating approximately 10 times more power than our intelligence reports suggested was possible." Frowned. That was odd but not threatening. More power did not automatically mean better weapons. "Continue monitoring. Maybe they are overloading their systems for one last desperate attack." The fleet passed Mars' orbit. The red planet hung silently in space, its dead surface marked by ancient craters. Ordered weapons charged. Across the fleet, thousands of energy cannons powered up. Missile tubes loaded. Planet-killer weapons began their charging sequences. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "the humans are broadcasting again." "Put it through." The same calm female voice filled the bridge. "This is Admiral, your 10 minutes are up. You have chosen poorly. Earth Defense Force, you are cleared to engage. Show them what humanity can do." Laughed. "Show us what humanity can do. With their primitive weapons and tiny ships, this will be over in minutes." But something was bothering him. The humans sounded confident, too confident. In 47 conquests, he had learned to read the voices of doomed species. They usually sounded desperate or afraid, sometimes angry, but they never sounded calm and professional when facing impossible odds. "Sir," the tactical officer called out urgently, "the human ships are moving." On the main screen, the human fleet was indeed moving, but not toward the hegemony fleet. Instead, they were spreading out, forming a perfect sphere around Earth. It was a defensive formation, but unlike any had seen before. "They are not attacking," he observed. "No, sir, they appear to be waiting." Stared at the screen. In all his experience, this was new. Most primitive species either fled in panic or launched hopeless attacks. The humans were doing neither. They were just waiting. "Sir," the sensor operator said nervously, "the energy readings from their ships are increasing. Whatever they are powering up, it is almost ready." "Time to Earth orbit." 18 minutes, sir." Made his decision. "Signal the fleet. Prepare for immediate combat. I do not know what the humans are planning, but we will not give them the chance to try it." But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered that something was very wrong. The humans were too calm, too confident, too ready. He pushed the doubt aside. He was fleet commander. He had never lost a battle. Today would be no different. Exactly 10 minutes after their ultimatum, the human fleet moved. Fleet commander watched through as the human ships took new positions. They did not charge forward like desperate warriors. They did not flee like cowards. Instead, they formed a perfect defensive sphere around there, and then something happened that made his blood run cold. Every human ship began broadcasting on the same frequency at the same time. The voice was Admiral, but her words were being spoken by every ship captain in the human fleet. "This is the Earth Defense Force. You were warned. You chose to ignore that warning. You have committed an act of war against humanity. The sentence is death." The bridge crew looked at each other nervously. The words themselves were not threatening. They had heard similar boasts from dozens of primitive species, but there was something in the way the humans said them. No fear, no desperation, just cold, professional determination. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "they are powering up weapons." Looked at the sensor displays. The human energy signatures were unlike anything in the hegemony database. "What kind of weapons are those?" "Unknown, sir. The energy patterns do not match any known technology." Decided to end this quickly. The humans wanted a demonstration of power. He would give them one they would never forget. "Target the empty space between our fleets," he ordered. Main battery, minimum power. I want them to see what real weapons can do. The Absolute Victory's main cannon was 50 meters wide and ran through the center of the ship. It could crack a planet's crust with a full power shot. At minimum power, it could vaporize a small moon. The massive weapon charged with a deep humming sound that vibrated through the entire ship. Energy readings climbed to levels that would power an entire star system. The crew watched their instruments with professional pride. This was the peak of hegemony weapons technology. Fire commanded. A beam of crimson energy lanced across space. It was beautiful and terrible, bright enough to be seen from thousands of kilometers away. The beam struck empty space and dissipated harmlessly, but its message was clear: surrender now or face this power. Waited for the inevitable surrender transmission. In his experience, a demonstration shot ended most conflicts before they began. No sane species would fight after seeing such overwhelming force. Instead, Admiral's voice came over the communications again. Impressive light show, our turn. One human ship fired a single shot. At first, thought his sensors were malfunctioning. The projectile appeared to be nothing more than a simple metal rod, perhaps 2 meters long and 30 centimeters wide. It looked like something a primitive species might use for construction, not warfare. "Sir," the sensor operator said in a confused voice, "I am reading a simple tungsten rod. No warhead, no energy signature, just solid metal." "Velocity?" asked. The operator checked his readings twice. "Sir, this cannot be correct." "Give me the numbers." 15% of light speed, sir, and accelerating." The bridge fell silent. Nothing that small should be moving that fast. The energy required to accelerate a tungsten rod to 15% of light speed was enormous. How were the humans generating that much power in such a small ship? "Deflector array status?" asked. "Full power, sir. The rod cannot possibly penetrate our shields." But as they watched, the tungsten rod struck the Absolute Victory's forward deflector array. The shields that could withstand the explosion of a star flickered once and died. The rod punched through them like they were made of paper. It hit the ship's hull and kept going. The rod tore through 17 decks without slowing down. It passed through armor plating that could withstand direct hits from antimatter warheads. It punched through bulkheads designed to contain nuclear explosions. It exited the rear of the ship and continued into empty space, its velocity barely decreased. Damage reports flooded the bridge. The tungsten rod had carved a perfectly straight hole through the Absolute Victory, destroying everything in its path. Fortunately, it had missed the main reactor and command center, but the psychological impact was devastating. Hal whispered. His chief engineer, a spider-like creature with 8 arms and 12 eyes, scrambled to provide answers. "Sir, I have analyzed the projectile's path. The rod was moving at approximately 47,000 kilometers per second when it hit us." "That is impossible. Nothing can accelerate solid matter to those speeds without exotic matter containment fields." "I agree, sir. It should be impossible, but somehow the humans have done it." Stared at the hole in his ship's hull. For the first time in his career, he felt genuine confusion. The hegemony's greatest scientists had spent centuries trying to achieve the velocities the humans had just demonstrated with what appeared to be a simple metal rod. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "Admiral is broadcasting again." "Put her through." The human's voice was still calm and professional. "Fleet Commander of the Absolute Victory, that was a warning shot. You have one chance to withdraw from this system. Any further hostile action will result in the complete destruction of your fleet." How did she know his name? How did she know his ship's designation? Hegemony intelligence protocols should have kept that information classified. "Sir," the tactical officer said urgently, "the human ships are changing formation." On the main screen, the human fleet was spreading out into attack positions. Each ship moved with impossible precision, like dancers following a carefully choreographed routine. But it was not just their coordination that was frightening, it was their movement patterns. "Are they using inertial dampeners?" asked. "No, sir. No signatures. No exotic matter emissions. They appear to be making 90-degree turns at full acceleration with no technological assistance. That would kill their crews." "Yes, sir. The G-forces should any biological life form aboard those vessels." Yet the human ships continued their impossible maneuvers, turning and accelerating in ways that violated every known principle of space combat. Their crews should be dead, but somehow they were not. Made a decision. He could not afford to show weakness in front of his fleet. Confusion or not, the humans were still vastly outnumbered. "All ships, battle formation. Prepare to engage the enemy fleet." "Sir," his chief engineer warned, "perhaps we should study their technology before engaging. We do not understand how they achieved those velocities." "I do not care how they did it," replied. "One lucky shot does not win a battle. We have 2,800 ships. They have 200. Mathematics is on our side." But as the hegemony fleet moved into attack formation, notice something else disturbing. The human ships were not just taking defensive positions, they were targeting his vessels with impossible accuracy. Every human weapon was locked onto a hegemony ship, despite being millions of kilometers away. Their targeting system should not be that precise at such distances. "Sir," the sensor operator called out nervously, "I am detecting massive power buildups across the entire human fleet. Whatever they are preparing to do, it will make their first shot look like a firecracker." Looked out at the human fleet. For 47 conquests, he had studied his enemies before attacking them. He had learned their capabilities, their weaknesses, their tactics, but these humans were unlike anything he had ever faced. They had technology that should not exist. They were performing maneuvers that should be impossible, and they were doing it all with the calm confidence of a species that knew exactly what they were capable of. For the first time in his military career, Fleet Commander wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Fleet Commander pushed his doubts aside. He was a veteran of 47 conquests. He had faced desperate enemies before. He would not let 200 primitive ships intimidate him. "All ships," he broadcast to the entire fleet, "attack formation. Target the human vessels. Show them the price of defying the hegemony." Battle Fleet Omega-7 surged forward. 2,847 ships moved as one, their combined firepower capable of turning Earth into a lifeless rock. The 12 planet-killer dreadnoughts led the charge, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that could crack continents. The human response, every principle of space warfare. Instead of retreating or charging forward to meet them, the human ships began to move in ways that made his mind hurt to watch. Vessels weighing millions of tons suddenly changed direction at perfect 90-degree angles. They accelerated from a dead stop to incredible speeds in seconds, then stopped just as quickly. "Impossible," whispered the chief engineer. "Those maneuvers would create forces of over 3,000 gravities. Nothing biological could survive." But the human ships kept moving, dancing through space like they weighed nothing at all. And as they moved, they fired. The first wave of hegemony missiles launched from the dreadnought's 12,000 warheads, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. It was standard tactics, overwhelm the enemy's point defense systems with sheer numbers. The human response was instant. Every ship in their fleet opened fire simultaneously. What emerged from their weapons was not energy beams or missiles. Instead, they fired thousands of tungsten rods identical to the one that had penetrated the absolute victory. But these were moving even faster, 20% of light speed, then 25%. The rods created a wall of relativistic death between the fleets. Every hegemony missile died before reaching its target, torn apart by projectiles moving at impossible speeds. The warheads that did detonate created brilliant explosions in empty space, lighting up the void but achieving nothing. "Return fire," commanded. The hegemony fleet unleashed its full arsenal. Energy beams that could melt asteroids lanced across space. Plasma cannons fired bolts of star-hot matter. Particle accelerators shot streams of antimatter. It was enough destruction to sterilize a dozen worlds. The human ships simply moved out of the way. They dodged energy beams moving at the speed of light as if they could see them coming. They twisted between particle streams with impossible grace. When they could not avoid an attack, their hulls seemed to bend reality itself, deflecting weapons that should have destroyed them completely. "Sir," the tactical officer called out in panic, "the humans are returning fire." What came back was devastation beyond worst nightmares. The humans did not just use kinetic weapons. They deployed energy systems that operated on principles no hegemony scientist had ever imagined. Beams of coherent gravitons reached across space to grab hegemony ships and twist them into impossible shapes. Quantum disruption fields caused entire vessels to simply cease existing at the molecular level. The first dreadnought died within minutes. The Eternal Conquest, pride of the hegemony fleet, was caught by a graviton beam that stretched it like putty. Its 50-kilometer hull twisted into a spiral before breaking apart, spilling its crew of 50,000 into the vacuum of space. "All ships evasive maneuvers," commanded. But there was nowhere to run. The human weapons had impossible range and perfect accuracy. Ships that tried to retreat found themselves targeted by weapons that bent space itself to reach them. The laws of physics seemed to work differently for human technology. A second dreadnought vanished in a flash of quantum fire. Then a third. The massive ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being destroyed like toys. "Sir," the chief engineer reported, his voice shaking, "I am analyzing their weapon signatures. The humans are not just using advanced technology, they are manipulating spacetime itself." "What does that mean?" demanded. "It means they have mastered principles that our greatest scientists consider theoretical impossibilities. They are not accelerating their projectiles. They are compressing space in front of them and expanding it behind them. They are not using energy weapons. They are manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe." On the main screen, hegemony ships were dying by the dozens. Heavy cruisers were torn apart by gravitational tides. Destroyers simply vanished as quantum fields unraveled their atomic structure. The escort ships were being hunted down by human vessels that moved like living creatures rather than mechanical constructs. "How many have we lost?" asked. 700 ships in the first hour, sir. The humans have lost zero. Zero. In 1 hour of combat, the most powerful fleet in galactic history had lost a quarter of its strength without inflicting a single casualty on the enemy. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "Admiral is broadcasting again." "Put her through." The human's voice was still calm, as if she were discussing the weather rather than the destruction of an entire fleet. "Fleet Commander, this is your second warning. Withdraw now, and we will allow your remaining ships to leave. Continue this attack, and we will destroy every vessel in your fleet." Wanted to retreat. Every instinct told him to run, to save what remained of his force. But he could not show weakness in front of the entire galaxy. If word spread that the hegemony fleet had been defeated by primitives, it would mean the end of their empire. "All remaining ships," he broadcast, "full assault. Concentrate fire on the human flagship." It was a mistake. The human fleet responded by demonstrating the true extent of their capabilities. Ships that had been holding back suddenly revealed weapons that made their previous attacks look gentle. Reality itself seemed to tear apart as the humans unleashed technologies that should not exist. A gravitational wave weapon turned 50 hegemony ships into a spiral of twisted metal. Temporal distortion fields aged entire vessels into dust in seconds. Space itself began to fold and warp as the humans demonstrated their mastery over the fundamental forces of existence. The remaining dreadnoughts lasted another 30 minutes. The heavy cruisers died next, their thick armor useless against weapons that attacked matter at the quantum level. The destroyers scattered in all directions, but the human ships pursued them with predatory efficiency. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we have lost over 2,000 ships. Only escape pods are launching now." Looked at the tactical display. His mighty fleet was gone. Centuries of military engineering and tradition had been swept aside in 3 hours by a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. "Sir, the humans are targeting us directly." On the screen, a single human ship approached the absolute victory. It was small compared to the massive dreadnought, but it moved with the confidence of a predator approaching wounded prey. "Shields at maximum," ordered. "Sir, our shields have been useless against their weapons." "Then we die fighting." But the human ship did not fire. Instead, it simply waited as the absolute victory's hull began to tear itself apart under gravitational forces that seemed to come from nowhere. The ship's massive frame twisted and groaned as space-time itself was warped around it. "Abandon ship," finally commanded. "All hands to the escape pods." As alarms blared throughout, the dying vessel made his way to the command pod. Through the viewports, he could see the remains of Battle Fleet Omega-7 scattered across millions of kilometers of space. Debris fields marked where proud ships had died. Escape pods drifted helplessly in the void. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been utterly destroyed by 200 human ships, and the humans had not lost a single vessel. As his escape pod launched from the dying flagship, finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. The hegemony had not encountered a primitive species ready for conquest. They had found a civilization so far advanced that their own technology looked like stone tools in comparison. The humans had been playing with them from the beginning. Fleet Commander floated in his escape pod, watching the last of his mighty dreadnoughts break apart under human fire. The absolute victory died slowly, its massive hull twisting like paper as gravitational forces tore it into pieces. Chunks of metal the size of buildings drifted away in all directions, joining the debris field that had once been Battle Fleet Omega-7. Of 2,847 ships, only 37 escape pods remained. Through the small viewport, could see human vessels approaching. They moved with the same impossible grace they had shown during the battle, sliding through space as if the laws of physics were suggestions rather than absolute rules. One ship positioned itself near his pod and began a tractor beam lock. The human vessel was beautiful in its simplicity. Unlike hegemony ships with their aggressive angles and weapon bristles, this craft was smooth and elegant. It looked more like a work of art than a war machine, yet had seen what such ships could do. This single vessel could have destroyed his entire fleet alone. A docking tube extended from the human ship and connected to his pod. The airlock opened with a soft hiss and found himself facing 2 human soldiers. They were smaller than he had expected. The intelligence files had described humans as average-sized bipeds, but seeing them in person was different. They looked young and fragile compared to the warriors of the hegemony, yet these beings had just crushed the greatest military force in galactic history. "Fleet Commander," one of the soldiers said in perfect hegemony standard. She was a female with dark skin and kind eyes. "I am Lieutenant Martinez. Admiral would like to speak with you." Followed them through corridors that his understanding of ship design. The walls seemed to pulse with gentle light, and gravity remained constant even as they moved through sections that should have been perpendicular to each other. The ship's interior was larger than should have been possible given its external dimensions. They entered a conference room where Admiral was waiting. She was younger than had expected, with gray hair and calm brown eyes. She gestured to a chair that adjusted itself to accommodate his alien physiology. "Please sit," she said. "We need to talk." Sat carefully, his mind racing. "You defeated my fleet." "Yes." "How?" Admiral smiled sadly. "That is exactly what every species asks when they finally understand what they have encountered. The answer is both simple and complex." She touched a control panel, and the room's walls became transparent, showing the wreckage of his fleet floating in space. "Your intelligence reports were not wrong about human technology, Commander. They were incomplete." "I do not understand." "The hegemony has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, continued. In all that time, every species you encountered developed technology along the same basic path: energy manipulation, exotic matter applications, gravitational field generation. It is a logical progression for most civilizations." She paused, looking out at the stars. "Humanity took a different path." "What do you mean?" "We discovered faster-than-light travel only recently, as your report stated. But we had been working on the theoretical foundations for over a century. While other species focused on manipulating energy and matter, we became obsessed with understanding spacetime itself." Admiral stood and walked to the window. "Hawking, human scientists who lived centuries ago. They gave us the mathematical tools to understand reality at its most fundamental level. We spent 300 years learning to manipulate the fabric of existence itself." Felt his understanding of the universe crumble. "Your ships do not use conventional propulsion, no. We bend space around them. Distance becomes meaningless when you can compress it in front of you and expand it behind you. Our weapons do not accelerate projectiles. We alter the space they move through so that slow becomes fast and straight becomes curved." "The gravitational weapons." "We create artificial gravity wells, temporary black holes that we can control and direct. We can age matter by accelerating its passage through time or tear it apart by exposing it to differential gravitational fields." The magnitude of human technological achievement began to sink in. The hegemony had spent perfecting energy weapons and shield technology. The humans had learned to rewrite the laws of physics. "But your ships are so small," protested. "How do you generate such power?" "We do not generate power in the way you understand it. We tap into the zero-point energy field that permeates all space. The vacuum itself provides unlimited energy to those who know how to access it." Admiral returned to her seat. "Commander, your people see space as empty void between objects. We see it as a living thing, full of energy and potential. Once you understand that, technology becomes limited only by your imagination." "Why did you not share this knowledge? Why did you refuse to join the galactic community?" His expression hardened. "Because we had already met the galactic community. Your compliance fleet came to Earth 20 years ago, demanding tribute and submission. We tried to negotiate. We offered peaceful cooperation and technology sharing." She activated another display showing recordings from that first contact. Watched hegemony ships bombarding human colonies, demanding surrender. "Your people decided that humanity was too primitive to have rights," continued. "You enslaved our colonies on Mars and Europa. You demanded that Earth become a tributary state. When we refused, you attacked civilian populations." Remembered the reports from that mission. It had been classified as a minor compliance action against a rebellious species. He had not known about the civilian casualties. "That was when we made our choice," said. "We could have destroyed your compliance fleet easily. Instead, we studied their technology, learned your capabilities, and began preparing for the inevitable return." "You knew we would come back." "Of course. The hegemony does not accept defeat. We spent 20 years improving our defenses and expanding our fleet. We also sent scouts throughout the galaxy, studying every species under hegemony rule. Activated a new display showing dozens of worlds. Do you know what we found, Commander? Hundreds of civilizations living in fear. Species that had been conquered and enslaved, forced to provide tribute to maintain their existence. Entire cultures suppressed because they did not conform to hegemony standards. The hegemony brings order and civilization to primitive worlds. The hegemony brings tyranny and oppression, replied firmly. You have created an empire built on fear and submission. That ends now. What do you mean? Your fleet was not just defeated, Commander. It was broadcast live across the entire galaxy. Every world under hegemony control saw their mighty conquerors reduced to debris by a species they were told was primitive. Felt his blood freeze. If the battle had been seen by enslaved populations. 317 worlds have already declared independence, continued. The number grows every hour. Your empire is collapsing as we speak. The Council will send more fleets, bigger fleets. No, they will not, smiled again, but there was steel in her eyes. Because we have also sent a message to the Hegemony Council. Would you like to hear it? Without waiting for an answer, she activated the recording. Watched as a hologram of Admiral appeared, addressing the Council directly. Leaders of the Hegemony, the recording said, your fleet has been destroyed. Every ship, every weapon, every symbol of your military might have been reduced to scrap metal. This is what happens when you threaten humanity or our allies. The hologram continued. You have ruled through fear for 3,000 years. Today, that rule ends. Any further acts of aggression against Earth, our colonies, or any species seeking independence will result in the complete annihilation of your empire. You have built your power on the belief that you are the strongest force in the galaxy. You are not. You never were. Humanity is not interested in conquest or empire. We simply want to be left alone. But if you force us to act, we will end your civilization permanently. The recording ended, looked at with something approaching pity. The Council has already voted, she said. Unanimous surrender. All hegemony forces have been ordered to withdraw to their home systems. All enslaved species have been granted immediate independence. 3,000 years of galactic tyranny ended in one afternoon. Sat in stunned silence. His entire worldview had collapsed in the space of a few hours. The mighty hegemony, the greatest empire in galactic history, had surrendered to a single world. What happens to us now? He asked quietly. You will be returned to hegemony space, replied. Along with the other survivors, you will carry the message that Earth is not to be threatened again, ever. And the galaxy will be free to determine its own destiny. No more tribute, no more forced compliance, no more oppression. Stood up. Species that want to cooperate with each other can do so voluntarily. Those that want to be left alone will be left alone. As he was escorted back to his pod, looked one last time at the human ship's interior. Everything about it spoke of a technology so advanced that it seemed like magic. But more than that, it spoke of a species that had achieved something the hegemony never had: true mastery over the universe itself. The pod detached from the human vessel and began its long journey home. Through the viewport, watched the human fleet maintaining its protective formation around Earth. They had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply made it clear that conquest was no longer acceptable. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy was free. And it was all because one species had dared to tell the mighty hegemony a simple truth: leave us alone or face the consequences. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun.